Okay, and we're on. So, welcome, guys. Wait, we had opening session, which is session 0. We had Gigi Levy, which was session 1. We had Paris Pandir, session 2. We had Benji Singer, the GM of WeWork, session 3. We had the fun networking session, and number 4 was Ari. Then we had session number at 3 o'clock. Well, I'm missing. We just finished the session with Melissa from IBM, and before that we had with Vincent Boom. Did you see the session with Vincent?
You're asking me. Unfortunately, I only saw the WeWork one because I was driving in between.
Okay. Yeah.
But I really enjoyed that one.
So great. So we have here on stage with us Dr. Lior Zalmanson, one of my first academic inspirations. I always tell the story that before I was full-on community, I was actually working at WeWork at the time. It was early 2016, and we had a course in information technologies. And one of the assignments was to summarize a paper and choose out of a block of papers. And there was a paper, if maybe I was wrong, content versus community.
Yes.
And I said, wow, it's exactly what I'm interested in. And then I saw, wow, from all the papers that were from all over the world, this was from the Tel Aviv University. And one of the co-contributors of the paper was Dr. Lior Zalmanson. And the chutzpah, the Israeli in me, just looked him in Google and found him somehow on Facebook or LinkedIn, I don't remember how. And since then, I'm following and learning from Dr. Lior Zalmanson a lot. At the time, I think you were at NYU.
Yeah, true.
So that's it. He did his postdoc postdoc it was.
Yeah, it was my postdoc at NYU, working mostly on hackathons, actually. So I did a short time on hackathons with Tom Global, that I guess some of you know, and then more about decision-making with algorithms, which is related to what we're going to talk about, I guess.
Great, and that's exactly why they say that you can't join. Now you can. Some people said that we can't join. So if you had problems until now you can start joining. And we had some people with technical issues. We have so many people on the platform, and I'm trying to manage everything, so that's cool. So I need to see if I got your presentation.
So maybe I'll introduce myself for a second. I'll do some technical things in the meanwhile. Okay, so hi guys. So as Mike said, my name is Dr. Lior Zalmanson. I'm currently a faculty at Tel Aviv University, where I focus on user engagement. I actually teach a course on online experiences and how to better design them. Also how to better design online communities. We're also building now a concentration, which is not like a full program, but you are in the technology management program and you want to concentrate on user experience. So we are teaching more user experience and user engagement in a, I would say, scientific way, even though a lot of the tools are actually industry made in the last few years. So you are welcome to ask me questions about that also later, but I'm here. I guess Mike invited me to talk about what I currently do with communities and where my fascination is at the moment. And to tell you the truth, I'm very, very much interested in where human meets non-human in communities, right? We always think about communities in a very human way. We think about it as a place where humans meet, right? And interact and socialize. But actually, when you really come to think a bit about it, it has a lot of non-human components. And online communities became very much involved with the non-human algorithms. And they become a massive part. This is no longer the 90s where I would say the infrastructure, the platform, is really a tool. It really only mediates your community. Today, algorithms are doing many, many things, but even though they are so powerful and influential, surprisingly, we don't really speak about them, not even with our community members, and we are not aware to their consequences. And that's what I'm going to elaborate on maybe for the next 30 minutes or so. And I would also love to begin a conversation with you, because this is for me very early work. It's a lot of thoughts and questions that I have, and we are initiating a research that includes community managers from all around the world, community admins that we would love you to take part. But maybe I'll speak about it later. Could you share full screen? I think we're seeing.
Waiting for you. Great.
Okay, so Mike is showing this from his computer due to some technical issues at mine, and I will ask him to move on slides. So the purpose of this talk is going to be about communities and how they understand algorithms or do not understand algorithms. Mike, if you can move the slide, next slide. Okay. So the first question I want you to think about is who gets to make the social choices in your life? Just imagine your life, mostly your life online. This is the topic of this conversation. Who gets to make the social choices? Now, even though you probably know by now that I'm going to speak about algorithms, it's not really clear to what extent they're involved in many of the decisions that we take for granted. So if you can move to the next slide, I'm going to discuss the first example. So first of all, and this is, as you see, a personal story of mine, how should we be introduced to the world? The question of how you should be introduced to the world is very much the decision of an algorithm this day. So basically, I am a screenwriter, or to tell you the truth, I mostly have been a screenwriter. I'm no longer that active in the field. I'm doing maybe one film every couple of years. It's sort of a hobby of mine. It's something I like to do. It also relates to my interest in storytelling. But luckily, somebody opened for me an IMDb page. Since my last two films were at festivals all over the world, then I was entitled, I guess, to an IMDb page. And for Google, the fact that I have an IMDb page makes me a screenwriter. And the title screenwriters comes before every other title. Like if you would have asked me, how do I define myself? I would better define myself as a researcher. I feel like it's more of what I do most hours of the day. But that was not up to me. Google decided here that in their eyes, I'm a screenwriter. And that sometimes causes me issues, you know, that sometimes in conferences, people check me out and then say, oh, you're really a screenwriter. And I'm like, yeah, true, but you know, it wasn't my choice to define it that way. So you're welcome to check out the movies later if you want. But that's number one. So next slide, please. So the second question should be, who should be your friends? So I recently accumulated a lot of friends on Facebook, and I'm reaching 5,000 people. And I don't know if you have experienced this, but when you reach close to 5,000 people, Facebook shows you a list of friends you might wish or want to delete. So they make some choices about who are the friends that should not be your friends, really. And I looked at that list and I tried to decipher, what is this algorithm? Like clearly there were people there that I haven't spoken with in a while, and people who maybe are not liking my post that much. But I was like, maybe those are people who blocked me and I don't know of it. Like, who gets to choose who are the friends I will be deleting? And even if you haven't reached 5,000 friends, you know that Facebook shows you people you may know. So Facebook is trying to matchmake you with people of their choosing based on their criteria, which is, of course, very unclear to you. So you can only guess, as we will speak about it later. So next slide will show you a third example, perhaps. So this is my page at ResearchGate. I'm a researcher, as I said, also a screenwriter, but mostly a researcher. And I have a number next to my name. And the number is also the result of an algorithm that I don't really understand. When you go to their page, they say something like, okay, we do some sort of a status based on the number of citations and the number of friends who are following you. And it's sort of like PageRank of Google. And it's sort of like, but it also is related to the number of questions you answer on the forum. And it's actually not so clear. How do you, how do you get to that number? And I have little understanding of what should I do to improve that number. But the number says something about me to various people. That's why I'm very interested in my social rank, but I have limited capability of understanding, ability to understand how was it, made and who makes these decisions. So, and I have a few more examples. So next example, please. And this probably you all know, right? So Google intervenes in your communications, in your emails, and they suggest you with like AI-based clear and simple and short answers or replies to your emails. So also, if you think about it, it's not just who you are meeting, it's not just who you are, it's also how do you talk, what is the tone, what is the reply. Because a lot of people choose those, I would say, semi-automatic or default or status quo replies and do not really, judge them or calculate their answers, just use the algorithm. So the algorithm here is very much a conversation starter or conversation ender. Another example, Mike, will be, let me see if I remember what the next example was. Okay, so this is, I guess, something you all know, that a lot of dating algorithms, matchmaking in terms of romance, is basically can set you up with a mate for life, can choose for you who will be your social match. That's quite a responsibility. And again, OkCupid, even Tinder, eHarmony, if you remember, in the history, in long time history, all are websites that incorporate some degree of algorithms to matchmake with different people. The next slide, I think, is maybe my last example for this part. Yes, so this is a funny example I just found out recently about. So algorithms also moderate conversations, right? So in this paleontology conference, dinosaur conference, the word bone, pubic, and stream were banned from the conversation, which meant literally that people who found pubic bones of dinosaurs in streams could not talk about it. So algorithms are also used, as you know, to do content moderation, and that also changes the way we have discussions, changes the subjects of discussions, and basically changes the nature of communities sometimes. So we've seen a lot of interventions by algorithms in our day-to-day social lives online, and specifically our community online. Next slide, please. And yes, so our social lives are deeply influenced by algorithms. So I want you to take this next slide, if you can, Mike, as some sort of an exercise. I want you to think or write down about an algorithm that had massive impact on your social life. Social life or social lives, if you have more than one. Sometimes online we have more than one. So you could use the chat if you like to just, if you want to share with us algorithms that maybe I haven't mentioned, but have some social impact on your life. You don't have to. You could just think about it in your head in our next few slides. Accelerator ads, Facebook feeds. Thank you, Noah and Elinor. LinkedIn recommendation. I wanted to give some LinkedIn examples. I know LinkedIn is a big one. Also with their AI auto-completion stuff, this also kind of massive. So next slide, please. Feminist group. I'm not sure what feminist group, what algorithm is if you're, yeah, there are sometimes people and algorithms that you can tell apart, but we are focusing on algorithms this day. So algorithms are playing multiple and sometimes invisible roles, right? So just think about the algorithms you suggested or you had in mind and haven't shared with us, and think of maybe which category do they belong to. So algorithms can act as audience, right? When you post something online, the first person no, sorry, it's not really a person, right? But that actually is debatable. The first entity that basically is your subject for, I don't know, for your post is actually an algorithm, right? You want to convince the algorithm that you are worthy of posting, that you shouldn't be censored, you should be promoted, and so and so. Algorithms could be moderators, as I mentioned. Algorithms could also be curators, right? They curate your feed. Somebody here said Facebook feed. That's true. They could be matchmakers, as we've seen. They could be choice makers, like the Netflix example Michal just mentioned, right? They could make choices for you and can hide a lot of the rest. So basically, you are stuck in this echo chamber or filter bubble due to these algorithms, and you, of course, you know it. You experience this on a daily basis. They can also help us, right? They're not necessarily bad things. They actually help us to navigate an ocean of information overload. So they're also help, but they could be also police. They could ban us from websites. They could kick us out. I mean, they could judge us, right? They could make judgments. And if we should pay you or not, if you are worthy or not, and so on and so forth. Pinterest images, right? They are kind of set by algorithms, recommendations based on actions you've already made. True, you are stuck on these loops made by algorithms that decide who you are and sort of makes you confront that on a daily basis. And it's really hard sometimes to invent yourself online because of that. So Mike, next slide, please. True. So I'm just saying, Noah is mentioning in the chat Pinterest, which is it does narrow your style. You could also think on Facebook and Instagram as narrowing your style. Like if you're following, I don't know, drag queens, you'll get drag queens everywhere because they put you in the box, right? They decide who you are, what you like, and then they just show you tons of it based on these engagement statistics. So I want you to now focus on 3 questions, right? So first of all, are you aware? Are you aware to the algorithms in your social lives? And specifically the algorithms that are in work in your at work in your community. Do you know which algorithms Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram are implementing and how they affect your community? Second question, next slide. Sorry, I have an example first. One example, no, it's okay. It was the right slide. One example of that is this algorithm, right? So you know about post reach, right? Not every community has this, but my community, Tarbut B'Yemei Corona, Culture in Corona Days, that I opened last year, and I've become officially a community leader. I was just a community researcher mostly before. Now has this algorithm at play, and they show me for each and every post how many people saw it. But to tell you the truth, and I talked with a lot of other community leaders, we don't really know how it works, right? We don't really know why one post gets 2,600 reach, views, whatever, and another one posted at the same time by people of the same status, both have pictures in them, they get only 1,500. Like, why? Probably, we have some guesses, and we'll talk about the guesses later, but we don't really have an answer. So the second question I want you to ask yourself, next slide, is, are your community members aware to the role of algorithms, right? Do the people that you lead in your community that you facilitating, do they know how algorithms work? And that leads us to a third question in the next slide. Is it part of your role as community manager or community admin, community moderator, to explain the work of algorithms as far as you know, as far as you are aware, to your community members? Should this be a conversation to have in the community? And as you can imagine, my answer is definitely yes. My answer is that we are not doing it quite often, and that this should be serious because otherwise we are not always aware to the effect on us and to the community. And sometimes as community leaders, we get the blame. We get blamed for something the algorithm has done. And I believe we could all profit from these discussions. Next slide, please. So let's focus on one example that will start on, we always get blamed. No, yeah, I know. Noah and I actually had a lot of conversation about this earlier a few weeks ago. So the example I want to focus with you starts in the next slide, is actually my research on Uber. Uber is a research that I've been conducting in the last 5 years. It was just published now under a different name that I can share with you later. I see some indication that my internet is not stable. I hope you can all hear me all right. And I've been researching a phenomenon called algorithmic management. Uber drivers, like Wolt drivers, they are all controlled by algorithms, right? There is no dispatcher, there is no taxi station anymore. Basically, you are on your own, pretty isolated, and the directions you receive are from Google Maps, and the instructions in terms of where should you go from the Uber app. So you're very much managed by algorithms, managed by the app. And I wanted to know, and we wanted to know, what kinds of tensions and what do they understand or not understand about the algorithms in their lives. So in the next slide, I just mentioned here a few of the algorithms that control their behavior. So of course they have tracking, so they have analytics and tracking. So the Uber team sees wherever they go. There's performance evaluation, the stars rating, and there's automatic implementation of decisions. So if they've done anything wrong, they supposedly are banned, kicked off the system for a while, or even supposedly fired. So if you can move on to the next slide. Drivers on Uber, as you know, are very autonomous. They are taking pride in themselves for being free and autonomous, being their own boss, choosing the number of hours, choosing when to stop. But here's where the tension starts, because that autonomous work basically gets into tension with the fact that the algorithms are actually very, very much, let's say they convey like a very serious boss that you cannot negotiate with, right? So when the algorithms think you've done something wrong, there's nothing that you could actually do about it almost. Like you could sort of, you could appeal, but that's not the most easy process. Usually doesn't have a lot of, they don't really get to see the light of day in the end of it, in the sense that they usually get punished first for something that they did against the system, if Uber thinks they worked against the system, and then maybe later they could get cleared of it, but it takes a while. So the next slide shows you that collision, if I remember correctly. Yes, so the collision is between the independent or autonomous labor and the algorithms in their lives. And what happens is that they don't understand the algorithms, as I mentioned in the relation to the community. They also do not understand how the algorithms work. They don't understand why they got just this amount of dollars. They don't understand why they're in a place which is supposedly full of people, like an airport, but they don't get calls. They don't understand, I don't know, why something sends them now to the other end of New York instead of leaving them in the neighborhood. And they also work in isolation. So that two phenomenons lead to a few problems. So let's move to the next slide. For instance, I've been following what they think about Uberpool in their community. So Uber drivers also have communities. They are non-official. Uber does not manage communities. They don't really like that they have driver communities. They are unofficial, usually in Reddit or on a website called Uberpeople, which is an ad hoc type of it has actually a lot of communities. So it's like a community forum, community platform. So Pool, you guys know what Pool is. So if you don't, Uberpool is like ride sharing. The idea that you don't have your own taxi or own car, but you get to share it with multiple passengers, which is quite easy now. So it's kind of like bubble service, but it's not typical for Uber. Not every call is Uberpool. Most of them is actually regular Ubers. So drivers hate Uberpool, and the reason they hate Uberpool is because once they are in that mode of the pool, they really are like robots. Imagine when you are taking regular drives, regular passengers, you know where you're going to and where are you going to leave to drop them off and continue on. With pool, it's no longer the case because you are starting the ride and more people are joining your car at random, in different places, and it sends you out to everywhere. And it looks like basically you're just like what we call in Hebrew nag boss, like you're driving people around. You don't know when it's going to end. Your car is always full with people. People complain about one another, about the algorithm that drives them to crazy places, and they always blame the driver. So in the next slide, you could see like they call it, if you can guess, Uberpool. And they say, think about how crazy it is. We're driving to a set destination in the middle of a crowded city, using another app to navigate, and suddenly, wham, like George Michael, now the sports machine guy, everything changes through the Uber partner app while we drive, forcing us to rearrange everything, including the navigator, with one hand on the wheel. They are really annoyed about this algorithm, and Uber doesn't share with them a lot of information about who will be the next passenger, when is it going to end. And so what they do is actually use communities. So they vent out in different forums. If you can move on to the next slide. Mike, are you with us? We might have lost Mike. Okay, so together with communities, they try to understand the algorithms together. For Uber drivers, this is a necessity. They really want to understand algorithms. But what really happens in those communities, as you can see in the next slide, is they're trying to guess, or what we call in sociology, to sense make the system. Sense making is when you try as a group to understand the situation you are in, to make sense of it. You have little clue about what's actually going on, right? You don't really understand the situation you are in. You don't understand the algorithms. Let's take this example. They say in the forum, they say in the community, let's say I do 70 rides in Lyft and then I need 5 more to make a bonus. Altogether, normally 5 rides take me like an hour and a half or 2, but those are, those last 5 rides take me like 7, 8, 10 hours, That's because they don't want to give me that ride, I guess. What this person is saying here is actually an urban legend, right? They're saying they feel like the algorithm, or not the algorithm necessarily, the company is using algorithm to take revenge. It's like they don't want them to make that extra buck. That's a lot of what I see there in communities. So because they are non-transparent, because those drivers are isolated, they use the community to make sense of algorithms. They use each other to give them social reinforcement because the stories get more and more complicated and everybody has their own experiences. So they sometimes create stories like urban legends and mythology, actually, of working with an algorithm, trying to understand. The algorithms tend to be, a monster in the end, or the company behind it is a monster. And that social reinforcement causes people actually to take action. So if you can move, I think, first, and then after the second, I'll ask you for the next slide. So for some, it's just releasing steam, but others may take it into action. I'm going to show you a few collective actions that they're trying to do as a community because they are mad about these algorithms they don't really understand. So the first thing they try to do, which is in the next slide, is resisting the system, just basically blocking the system, creating some sort of a blackout, an idea of some, basically just rejecting some feature, for example. They're actually saying in the form, we, the partner, will oppose slavery and will stand for rights. So no pool. Do not accept pool rights. That's one example of resisting the system. In the next slide, I liked the next driver who said, my mom would make dinners with olives, but I wouldn't eat the olives. As I grew up, my mother would ask me if I liked olives. After years and years of telling her I will not eat olives, she stopped her attempt to feed me olives. So the story they're telling here is, we will, stick to our guns. We're just going to say no and no and no, and they will understand, hopefully. So that's one type of resistance they're trying to get against algorithms. A second type is maybe a clear one, so I'll jump fast, talk really quickly about that one, is basically they're trying to switch the system. That's in the next slide. Next slide. Okay, switch the system. So when you go into Uber driver in New York, usually they have like 3 phones, not 1, 3 phones. One with Lyft, and back at the time there was Juno, the Israeli company Juno, that was bought by Lyft or worked with Lyft. I don't remember. There was Via also. So they have a few of them, and they're making this opportunistic behavior of choosing which one. It sort of is dangerous, right? Because you're really controlling a lot of cell phones while driving, which is not a good way. But you're trying to make the algorithms work in their favor, trying to imitate opportunistic behavior. If you can move 2 slides, because I'm seeing that I need to finish up quickly, and I don't have many slides left. I'm going to switch that. That's just another switching quote. So they also do gaming or tricking the algorithm. They're trying to find all these loopholes together. They're actually using forums to find the loopholes in algorithms and try to reverse engineer algorithms. I actually saw it also in Facebook communities. Like, some of you may have communities that deal with sensitive subjects like sexuality. So sometimes these community leaders finds way of how to write sex without writing sex, without getting censored, using, I don't know, like all these characters in between the letters, so they can sort of, it looks like sex, but it's not written as sex, and people understand that. So also Uber, they have their way of gaming the system. They have ways of knowing, if, for instance, a rude Uber customer joins your car, arrives to your car, they know when to drop them off in the first minute before that ride is actually officiated, and then that person supposedly could not put 1-star review on that Uber driver. So that's just one silly example, but there's a lot of examples of how they try to trick the system. And I want to conclude, there's 2, I think. Okay, so to sum, the effect of algorithms in our case is that non-transparent algorithms, they cause people and communities to second guess the systems. And second guessing, in many cases, make people assume the worst about algorithms, about the companies, right? And assuming the worst make people very resentful, and they make them resist the algorithm. Not always. Sometimes you feel like you can't resist, but at some points you do resist the algorithm. And also the fact that you are behind a computer and an app and you're being isolated, it does not help, right? It just causes more resentment, more resisting. Sometimes it's either or, right? If you can't resist, you resent. So I'll finish up with 2 slides. This is the one that sort of sums the model. This is a model we've done in 2017, tries to understand the effect of algorithm. I'm going to just skip this, but if somebody who wants more information about this, I could share with you later. So what should companies do? I don't know how many of you work in companies who have community type of features or community types of structures, but you do need to share your goals and purposes and constraints with your members or workers or colleagues or whatever you want to call them, partners, the people who are actually involved, right? You do want to allow for more transparency. Transparency is a really hard topic. It's really hard to make algorithms transparent. A lot of the time, the companies don't understand them enough to make them transparent. But you really want to give them the basic sense of what are the constraints and what are the needs of these algorithms and how the calculation is being done, even roughly. Just make them in it, make them feel like they're part of. And so you should encourage community, and you should involve your officials in it. But maybe the next slide will be more interesting to the people here, if you can move to that one. So if you are a part of a community, if you are a leader of a community, and that community is hosted by a platform that has algorithms, you need to raise awareness to that. You need to talk about the algorithms in your community. You need to socialize around it. Because I worry that in the age of major big platforms that hold most of our conversations at their hands, it's going to be really tough to manage the topics of conversations, to manage the socialization, where Facebook have a say as well, or Google has a say. The only way we can sort of level the playing field is by conversation, is by socializing, is by comparing our unique individual experiences to make sense of the algorithm. And you do need to educate. And if everything else fails, it is worthwhile to think about how you can resist algorithms in a lawful way, right? Do not do anything that is against the law or is sabotage, but you can think about resisting. Resisting can also mean go to a different platform. Find a place where you own the algorithms, when you are not a pawn in a game of some other people that do not share with you the rules. So I guess these were my thoughts for this session. You can move to the next slide with my email if you want. And I would love to take questions in the meanwhile.
Okay, so Lior, that was fascinating. And I loved how you summarized it with what we should do about it, like very clear bottom lines. I was talking with my networks and different, in WhatsApp groups and places like that. And, I'm updating sometimes about the sessions and when is it relevant for different groups. And, I have this guy that has over 1.5 million people in his platforms, managing together and using a lot of bots. And his questions were always very technical. I said, you're a bot yourself. And I said, this is a session for you. Just understanding an algorithm, like Lior thinks, okay, I just want to analyze this. It's and I know you're an emotional person. You're a screenwriter. You're a very cultural person. But it's amazing to see the both sides, like analytic part of something so social and emotional, and that I think nexus between those two is just fascinating. So thank you for the analytics and amazing insights. We had a question from Michal. If you want to raise your hand, Michal Seo, I'll hear. Great. You can ask live. Great. And we have 6 minutes to finish, so I'll just give you a heads up and hope Michal will join. Here she is.
Yeah.
Hi, Lior.
Hey.
Thanks for a fantastic session. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about just the algorithms and how they connect with COVID era at the moment, and how you see the connection between these two very very close aspects, because and if you see a connection actually.
Well, I see multiple connections. First of all, in many ways to control COVID, people, companies, but also nation states have used the algorithms, right, to control us. The algorithm that tells you that you were next to somebody who may had COVID is also a kind of, not really a transparent algorithm. That's kind of opaque, and it causes a lot of problems, not just in terms of privacy, but just understanding our future, democratic state. So I do feel that in the age of COVID, or any age of danger, we are more tolerant to putting somebody responsible in our life. And what I find in my last few research works is that we are actually getting more and more pro-algorithms. So despite my talk that really showed you resisting algorithms, actually the grand majority is actually really okay with algorithms. And the reason they are is, A, yes, objectively they do a lot of good things and save time and create opportunities even. But B is really lack of awareness, right? So I worry that the age of COVID will just bring this more stronger in terms of to the algorithms. But I do, you asked also about sense making in the chat. We are sense making this COVID era as we go as well. Sense making is really phenomenal to anything that we don't really understand well. There's no books on it, on the topic at the moment. So we really just have ourselves and our communities to fall on. So I really think you should all read about sense making. It's a really interesting theory and methodology to kind of understand the processes in your community in terms of knowledge. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on the topic.
So, by the way, where can people read more about sense making?
So I guess the if I remember correctly, the scientist that wrote about it was Carl Weick. Carl W.
Write it in the feed here?
What? Sorry.
Can you add it here in the feed?
Yeah. I'm writing you the Wikipedia article about him. He's like old school.
We're old school, don't worry. Ari and I especially.
Yeah. So go check this person out and read his theories. It's quite interesting, especially if you're interested in qualitative assessment of communities and behaviors of knowledge-related behaviors in communities.
Awesome. And my other question was also, do you have more time to continue this conversation? Because I know a lot of people want to speak to you, and we have the lounge. Will you have time to?
I can drop by later today after 7:30, I would say, because I'm running off to a different meeting. But I would love to. I gave you the email, so it's Zalmanson@gmail. So if any of you missed me and you want to continue the conversation,
I'll put it here.
Sorry, yeah, you could put it there. I can also say that Tel Aviv University is much interested in creating forums for community leaders, and I'm also in talks with that with Mike. And we hope to create academic partnerships.
Leo, we can facilitate. We have YCP, so we can all facilitate this stuff and do a collaboration with the Tel Aviv University, with you, and by the way, Professor Iris Ginsburg.
Yeah, yes.
And we can facilitate YCP as a platform. And by the way, we're now opening Community Pros, which is going to be a global community for community leaders. We've been working about it under the radar, and it's going to be launched after the summit. We're going to talk about it, but I'm here giving teasers about it now. And so totally would love to collaborate and do more work with you. It's super amazing. Yeah, Talia, I think, gave us some hearts around it. So did you play with it, with the lounge and everything? All of you guys, did you try to go to the lounge and join a table? Did you try it before, Leo? Before the
I haven't. I only tried this backstage.
So before you leave, because I know you have enough time, like you have 1 more minute, go there and just try it. So it's cool. And that's it. And Leo, again, every session with you, for me, it's like mind-blowing, and I love to have excuses like events, so you can make time and I can make time and we can talk together. And this is recorded, so we'll after the event, we'll send everybody all the videos, and also we'll edit some of the videos and put them in our YouTube channels and maybe sometimes in our different platforms. So stay tuned for more stuff from Leo. And I think we need to have just one full session about sense making, because I think it's a very interesting topic. So Leo, thank you again. We won't keep you from your next meeting. And
I'll see you guys later. I'll see you later tonight, maybe.
Great. So you'll join back to the networking, and we're gonna end the session. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.